In the desert outside modern-day Cairo, there's a structure made of over 2.3 million individual stone blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons, stacked with a precision that modern engineers still find genuinely difficult to explain. It was built roughly 4,500 years ago by people who had no iron tools, no wheels for hauling stone, and no written mathematics as we'd recognize it today. And yet, the Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north with an accuracy of within a tenth of a degree, a level of precision that some modern buildings still fail to match. For centuries, people struggled so hard to explain this that they invented aliens, lost civilizations, and secret ancient technologies to fill in the gap. But the real answer, the one archaeologists have spent decades piecing together from tombs, papyri, and the bones of the workers themselves, might be even more impressive than any of that. Let's start with the biggest myth. Slaves did not build the pyramids. This idea has been so deeply embedded in pop culture, from movies to Sunday school lessons, that it feels like established fact. But in the 1990s, archaeologists excavating near the Giza Plateau, led by Zahi Hawass, uncovered something that changed the entire picture. An actual workers' village, complete with bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and cemeteries where the builders themselves were buried, close to the pyramids, an honor that would never have been given to slaves. These workers ate a diet rich in meat, a luxury in ancient Egypt reserved for people the state valued. Their skeletons showed signs of hard labor, but also evidence of medical care, including healed broken bones that had clearly been set by someone with real medical knowledge. These weren't chained laborers worked to death and discarded. They were likely a rotating labor force, farmers who worked the land during the growing season and were conscripted, or in some interpretations paid, to work on the pyramid during the months when the Nile flooded their fields and left them nothing else to do. So imagine that shift in your head for a second. Not a whip-driven slave gang, but something closer to a national infrastructure project, with organized shifts, food rations, and a system of pride attached to being part of it. So if it wasn't slaves, how did they actually move stones that weighed as much as a school bus? This is where the flooding of the Nile becomes the hero of the story instead of the obstacle. Egyptologists now believe workers took advantage of the annual flood season to transport massive limestone blocks by boat along a network of canals dug specifically to bring the water closer to the construction site. In 2013, archaeologists discovered something remarkable at a site called Wadi al-Jarf, an ancient papyrus, one of the oldest ever found, written by a man named Merer, who worked as a mid-level official transporting limestone for the Pyramid of Khufu. His journal, essentially a 4,500-year-old logbook, describes in exact detail his crew's trips hauling stone blocks by boat along the Nile and a specially dug canal system, delivering the blocks directly to the base of the construction site. This single document confirmed something scholars had theorized for decades, but never had direct proof of. The Egyptians engineered water transport specifically to move stone at a scale that would be nearly impossible using land routes alone. But getting stones to the site was only half the problem. Once they were there, workers still had to lift them, some weighing tens of tons, up to heights of over 450 feet. And this is where the theories get genuinely fascinating, because there's no single confirmed method, but multiple pieces of strong evidence pointing toward different techniques used at different stages. The leading theory involves ramps, but not one giant straight ramp, which would have required an impossibly long resource-draining structure. Instead, evidence increasingly supports the idea of a spiraling ramp wrapping around the outside of the pyramid as it grew taller, allowing workers to drag stones upward using sledges, while teams poured water in front of the sledges to reduce friction on the sand. A technique actually depicted in ancient Egyptian tomb paintings, showing workers doing exactly this. In 2018, archaeologists studying an ancient ramp system at the Hatnub quarry, used for the same era of construction, found evidence of a ramp with a staircase-like structure and post holes on either side, suggesting workers used ropes attached to wooden posts to help haul massive stone blocks upward at a much steeper angle than a simple flat ramp would allow, essentially using leverage and mechanical advantage that archaeologists hadn't previously accounted for. Then there's the sheer organizational question. How do you coordinate tens of thousands of people, feed them, house them, and keep the entire project running for over 20 years, which is roughly how long historians believe the Great Pyramid took to complete. The answer lies in something almost as impressive as the stones themselves: ancient Egyptian bureaucracy. Papyri discovered at Wadi al-Jarf and elsewhere reveal a highly organized system of labor gangs, each with specific names like Friends of Khufu, divided into smaller units, with clear chains of command, food distribution records, and rotation schedules. This wasn't chaos. It was one of the earliest large-scale logistics operations in human history, requiring the ancient equivalent of project managers, supply chains, and payroll systems, thousands of years before anyone had a word for any of those concepts. Bread and beer were produced on site in massive quantities, not as luxuries, but as the caloric backbone that kept a workforce numbering in the tens of thousands, fed and functioning day after day, year after year. And that brings us to the mathematics, because building something aligned this precisely wasn't an accident of skilled guesswork. Egyptian architects used tools like the Merkit, a simple sighting instrument used to track stars, and specifically the position of certain circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, to establish true north with startling accuracy without a compass, which hadn't been invented yet. They used ropes with knots tied at specific intervals to create perfect right angles, a technique historians call the rope stretchers method, essentially a physical hands-on version of the Pythagorean theorem used more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. The base of the Great Pyramid is leveled to within just a couple of centimeters across a footprint the size of several football fields, a tolerance that required not just skilled labor, but a genuinely sophisticated understanding of geometry, astronomy, and surveying, passed down through specialized schools of architects and priests. So when you put all of these pieces together, the workers' village with its bakeries and medical care, the canal systems timed to the Nile's flood cycle, the spiraling ramps and lever systems, the bureaucratic labor gangs with their food rations and rotation schedules, the astronomical surveying tools, what emerges isn't a story about ancient aliens or lost magical technology at all. It's a story about something almost more remarkable: thousands of ordinary people, coordinated at a scale that wouldn't be matched again for centuries, using nothing but rope, wood, water, stars, and an enormous amount of organized human effort to build something that would outlast every empire that came after it. The pyramids weren't built by slaves whipped into submission, and they weren't built by aliens with technology beyond our understanding. They were built by farmers, bakers, brewers, and stonemasons who, for a few months every year, became part of something larger than themselves, and left behind a structure so precise, so massive, and so enduring that 4,500 years later, we're still standing in its shadow, trying to fully understand exactly how they pulled it off.